Hello, guys. This is me, Jonathan Dawes. I'm interviewing my grandpa, Dr. Kenneth James Dawes. And how are you today?
We're doing well.
Great. I'm just going to ask you to interview you. All right. So, tell us, Dr. Dawes, where were you born and where?
Born in Grand Forks almost 90 years ago, 1936. And you don't have to refer to me as doctor, call me grandpa.
Oh, you. What are your recollections of the end of World War II?
Recollection of World War II. Well, I was only 9 years old then, but certain things come to mind. One is that in each grade school classroom, there was a Red Cross box, and the students would donate things to go in the Red Cross box, which then went to, I think, prisoners of war. But anyway, we put in things like toothpaste and toothbrushes and pencils and little things like that. And it was kind of a certain amount of competition between classes as to how many boxes we could fill. So that was a good memory. There were several good memories. I remember so well the end of the war. And again, I was 9 years old or so, and Grand Forks was a different place at that time. But somehow I got downtown, and there were people in the streets all over singing and dancing and so happy. The building that is now where Sky's restaurant was the bank at that time. And there was a big clock that was attached to the wall, the corner of the wall there. And that seemed to be where everybody was kind of congregating, was in that area. So it was a wonderful memory. One of the sadder memories, though, is a number of people in the neighborhood, their sons or daughters or husbands, were killed or wounded in the war, and that made it very sad. What they did at that time is they had little flag-like things that they would put in the front window so you could see it. And if a family had, say, two sons who were in the military, there would be two purple stars on that little flag. And if there was a gold star, it meant that a son or daughter or whatever had been killed. And so that made it kind of somber for us. It made us realize that even though the war was so far away, it still was hitting us at home.
That's very interesting. And is there, like, I was going to ask, like the propaganda during World War II, like the cartoons, for example, what those, like, stereotypes and stuff,
Well, yeah, I suppose they would call them stereotypes. Certainly we're trying to put down the enemy, and so whenever a person who was Japanese was shown, they usually had big buck teeth and made them look rather grotesque. The Germans were all seen as being somehow controlled by Hitler, and they were seen as being very, very evil people. And that was hard to understand because so many people in the neighborhood had come from Germany or had come from European countries. And it was hard to figure out how they could be so nice in the local neighborhood, but yet so evil over in Europe.
Interesting, yeah. What kind of food, did you have, was very popular growing up that you ate a lot of?
Well, there was rationing at that time, which meant that you couldn't just go and buy a beef roast or something like that. The military had first dibs, of course, on many of those items. So, for instance, there were sugar, we had rationing books, and you could only get so much sugar each month, or you could only get so much of like tires for your automobile. So, and so the food was just fine, but we ate a lot of mutton as opposed to beef.
Oh yeah. So when did you? So when did you first start to be a paper boy?
Oh, that was when I was in the 5th grade. So I suppose I was about, 10 years old, 11 years old.
All right.
Something like that.
Okay. Can you tell me more about it? Like basically,
Well, I was a paper boy for 5 years, and in my neighborhood, was part of what was called at that time the Jewish neighborhood, because many people who were Jewish lived in that area. And so a lot of my friends were Jewish, and the people that I knew in the neighborhood were Jewish. And it was a good experience. I was amazed at how many people, even though they were low income, took the newspaper. It seemed like everybody read the newspaper.
Yes. So moving on, like a decade. Tell me, when both of your brothers enlisted to serve in the Korean War, can you tell me more about that?
Well, the Korean War was a very sad time. I remember when it started in 1950, and I was a paper boy, and I remember looking at the newspaper and saying that North Korea had invaded South Korea and that the United States wanted them to stop. And before long, the United States troops were in there. But I remember at the time thinking, boy, just give the Americans 30 days and they're going to wipe these Koreans right off the map and this thing will all be over. Well, it didn't happen that way. First of all, the North Koreans moved over the border and defeated the South Koreans very quickly, and it got to the point where there was just a small area of land left in Korea that was controlled by the Americans. But by that time, the draft was on, and young men and women, well, the women weren't drafted, but young men were drafted, and the troop numbers came up, and so there was an amphibious invasion north of Seoul, which was right about on the old border between South Korea and North Korea. And so very quickly things turned around. The North Koreans came back into North Korea primarily, and the Americans chased them all the way up to the point where China and North Korea are bordered together. And again, we thought, well, now the war is over because the North Koreans have been defeated and driven out of the South Korea, but also out of North Korea. We didn't realize is that the Chinese were just lurking and waiting. And almost overnight, the Chinese troops came in and fought with the American troops. I should add, by the way, the Korean War was unique in that it was not just between the United States and North Korea. There were many countries like England and Turkey and so forth that were also fighting with the Americans. But anyway, the Chinese moved in, and before long, the Americans were driven down about to the line where the North Korea and South Korea originally were located. And it's about that time my brother Russell was drafted and came to Korea as an infantryman, as a combat soldier. And he fought in Korea then for 13 months. My brother Ray was in the Air Force and he was based in Okinawa, so he didn't see combat, but Russell saw combat for, as I say, a long period of time. He was quite a hero in my mind because he was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action. He managed to save some, not only Americans, but South Koreans that were in his unit. However, he came back, not the same Russell as went over. He was very quiet most of the time. He could be explosive at times. Today we probably call it that he had PTSD. You know what that is?
Yes.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. So when he came home, all he wanted to do was to get a job up in the North Woods, working as a lumberjack. And he wanted to be alone. It took him many years to get out of that mode. By the time he was in his 80s, he was eager to go to veterans meetings and could talk a little bit about his experiences in Korea. But anyway, it was a crazy war because where we started and where we ended is just about the same place. And Russell wrote a little article, and on it he was reflecting on the war. And he said, many Chinese and Koreans and Americans killed, but no accomplishments.
Okay.
No accomplishments. All that had gone by and all those terrible things had happened. And here they were right almost where they started.
Okay. All right. When did you graduate high school?
1954.
54. Oh. You know, there's an interesting story you told me. I love your story about the choir and your friend at graduation. Can you tell the story?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories. I had a good friend, Dick Trossett, who was quite a character. It was graduation time, and we were graduating from Central High School, and we were supposed to go to a practice the night before graduation. And I did, and we learned, where we're going to process and what roles we had and all that kind of thing. Well, Dick somehow forgot to go to that practice or whatever. And so the next day when we were actually going to graduate, he came up to me and said, I wasn't here for the practice, what should I do? And I said, I don't know, but ask Sherry, because Sherry Torvik will be in the line right in front of you, because they go alphabetically. So he said, okay, so he talked to Sherry and asked her for advice as to what he should be doing. And she said, don't worry about it, just follow me. So Dick thought that was all right, and they started processing in. And what Sherry had forgotten was that she was in the Centralian chorus. And the chorus was to go up on the stage onto the risers. Well, Sherry then turned to do that, forgetting about Dick behind her, but Dick didn't forget about the fact that he was supposed to follow her, so he followed her right up onto the stage and up onto the riser. And he didn't know what he was supposed to do or what he could do. Anyway, he took a couple of the guys who were basses, were right behind him, and they physically just lifted him up and put him between them. So here's Dick now up on the stage in the chorus line, and Mr. Sherwood comes out. Mr. Sherwood was kind of I don't know if the word grouchy is the right word, but he was not a real jovial person. And he looked up there and he saw Dick up on the stage, and he didn't quite know what to do, but he said, well, just go ahead and we'll sing. So they sang, and Dick decided, well, as long as I'm up here, I might as well make myself look like I'm singing. So he did that. Well, they got through it, and Dick stayed away from Mr. Sherwood, and we got down and sat in the chairs in the audience, where we were supposed to sit. And afterwards, I talked with Dick. I said, "What's going on?" And he told me the story about what he had to follow Sherry. And he said, Ken, he said, my mom was there in the audience, and she saw me up on the stage, and she was so proud.
Do you remember what the song was, or?
No, I don't. It's a typical high school graduation.
Yeah, and so at graduation, like, of course, that stuff, and like after you got your diploma, I know you said you basically, well, in high school, like you were on the basketball team, and then you basically went to work or something, or you decided to quit there so you could work. Is that right? Or
yeah, we our family was not economically blessed, and I needed to work, so I worked at Gamble's store, which was like a hardware store, after school each day, and then later I worked for Valley Piano, and that was at the time when television first came into Grand Forks.
Right.
It was 1953, and all of a sudden now we had 2 TV stations broadcasting, and everybody wanted television. Well, of course, they had to have an antenna on the roof because there wasn't any cable television. You had to get it out of the, shall we say, out of the air. So everybody wanted a television antenna, and that was my job, was putting up television antennas. So I was on many, many roofs throughout Grand Forks. And it was very, very busy between 1953 and about 1958 or so, putting up antennas.
Okay.
Now that we have cable, of course, nobody has antennas.
So after high school, so after graduation, did you have like a party, like a grad party at all, or?
I don't remember that.
Oh, okay. All right.
I probably went back to work.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. You told me you went back to work when basically after graduation, basically, like. Yeah. So interesting. So after high school, what did you do after high school?
Well, I went to college. Went to the University of North Dakota.
What was your major?
Social work. Actually, I was in pre-law, and at a certain point, I decided I really didn't care for the law courses, so I switched over to social work.
Well, you would have been a good lawyer. But yeah, social work, yeah. So you went there for 4 years, and did you, were you a social worker right after that, or?
For about a year, and then I went to graduate school at the University of Utah, and then later at Columbia University.
Columbia University, what years were you went to Columbia for?
That was 1960 to 61.
If I can ask, basically, were you on like because I know Columbia is a I don't know if it's a private school, but I know it's not cheap. I know that. How did you basically, like, I know of course you worked a lot, but were you able to go to Columbia?
I had what's called a stipend. I had a potential employer who paid part of the North Dakota Department of Human Services, and they agreed to give me a certain amount of money and pay for the tuition, provided I would come back and work for them once I had the degree.
Okay. So your degree, so what you graduate? So you graduated Columbia. You were only there for 1 year, and yeah. So then, did you? What else did you do after Columbia?
Well, a variety of things. We direct developed what we call the Human Service Center up in Williston, and that's where I met your grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was at the State Industrial School as clinical director, and then decided to go back to graduate school to get my doctorate in sociology.
Okay. What school was that?
Huh?
Oh, which you went back to graduate school? Did you go back to Columbia or?
No, University of Minnesota.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have to. Can you tell me where you were and what are your memories of the day that President Kennedy was shot back in '63?
Oh, yeah, that's still a fresh memory. It was before your dad was born, shortly before your dad was born, and I was at work. And a guy came running in, a friend of mine came running in, he said, President Kennedy's been shot. Well, we couldn't believe that, but we just everybody just cleared off and went to their own homes to watch television to see what was going on. And sad as it was, Walter Cronkite came on and said the president has been killed. And so it was a very difficult day because Kennedy was so well liked. He was a young man, he was good looking, his wife was beautiful, he had 2 wonderful little kids. The previous president was Eisenhower, and Eisenhower was a good president, but he was elderly, he had his health problems, he certainly wasn't robust like President Kennedy was. And so it was very difficult. And then 2 days later to learn that Oswald had been killed, and we kind of wondered what was going on. And it was about that same time that Nikita Khrushchev over in Russia was doing some strange things. And I don't know, it was a crazy time. People were building bomb shelters, and it was just a crazy time.
Yeah. So fast forward like 1965 through 1975, during around the Vietnam War, like the hippie movement. Can you tell me where you were and what are your memory? What do you remember about the Vietnam War? Was there much of an anti-movement here in North Dakota at the time?
Yeah. I was married, and we had your dad as the son, so I was not drafted. I was also on what we called I can't think of the term, but it was a class of people who felt they were needed more in the United States than they were needed in the military. And so I did serve in the military, but the Vietnam War was a terrible time. Different from the Korean War. The Korean War, all the different countries kind of participated in that, and it seemed like we had a clear vision of who the enemy was. But in the Vietnam War, a lot of people couldn't understand why we were going over there to fight, and they were, North Vietnamese against South Vietnamese, and so that was sad, and we had television by that time, so you could see the war every day. Whereas the Korean War, we still didn't have television at that time. So where we saw things would be in the movie theaters, in the newsreels.
Okay.
But with the Vietnam War, it was as if it was in our living room all the time. And a lot of people a lot of young men especially, didn't want to be drafted. They went to Canada, and there were Vietnam protests, and it was a time when when America seemed like it was divided into two camps, those who were for the war and those who were against the war. It was a very unpleasant time.
Did you like any the hippies? Did you ever meet any see any hippies at all?
There were hippies around, but they didn't have much to do with the war. There were some groups that were very much anti-war, but most of the hippies were just more interested in getting drugs and getting drunk and kind of fading out from the rest of society.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know for hippies, I know you told me a long time ago that when you were living in Bismarck, when my dad was I think a baby or something, you said that you were at the state capitol you saw some hippies at the capitol. At the state capitol.
Yeah.
Did you see any of them you said you saw them gather around on the grasses?
Well, there probably were. I don't remember that specifically.
Okay.
There were some crazy things that happened, like the zip to zap, or a bunch of college students from NDSU decided to go out to Zap, North Dakota, and have a party, and it kind of got out of hand. But they weren't hippies by any means. They were college students.
What do you remember about the day the Berlin Wall fell in 1989?
All I remember about it is happiness. Being so glad that the wall had finally ended. Meaning that this many years struggle with the Soviet Union had changed. And now it looked like the Germans were going to be able to be reunited. And we thought things are really straightening out.
Okay. You became a grandpa in 1992. Tell us about how you reacted and what your expression was, and how grandma may have felt when you became one.
You're talking about yourself.
No.
Well, I mean that sincerely. You're one of those grandchildren that came along, and we were so absolutely delighted to have grandchildren.
Yeah.
And then, not too many years later, we had great grandchildren, and that was wonderful too.
Yeah.
There's an old joke about grandchildren are wonderful because they're God's gift to you for not abandoning your own teenagers when they were at home.
Oh yeah.
So it's
and
been a real blessing to us.
My last question is about when you became a great-grandfather in 2024. How did you feel about that?
Well, as I was saying, it's about the same thing. Just wonderful. One of the things about being a grandfather, great-grandfather, whatever, is you yourself can be a child again. And you can get down on the floor and you can play with them. And if somebody saw me playing with blocks and there was no kid around, they'd wonder. But when there's a little child with you, it's perfectly normal and it's great fun. And I can't think of a greater blessing than having children and grandchildren, as well as great-grandchildren, foster children, and whatever. That's what makes the world go round.
Well, I guess there's a bonus question, but I see I don't need to ask it because you probably already answered it. But maybe what is your greatest hope for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren generations that are coming?
I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but we have a little, kind of a little, not a plaque, it's a little, like a little flag. And it says on it, to the effect that you have made the world a better place. Or your being here has made the world a better place.
Okay.
That's what I want for every one of my children, grandchildren, foster children, whatever, that they make the world a better place. And they can do that. Not to be a problem, but be a positive.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. This was good. Well, thank you guys so much for having us. I'm Jonathan Dawes. This is my grandpa, Ken Dawes, and we are out.